Open up the depths of your heart to find eternity and live for more than your eyes can see. Give God the glory.
Welcome to part 2 of the study on the Bible doctrine of salvation. If you missed part 1, I'll put a link right up here for you. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so and click the notifier bell. It doesn't cost anything and it keeps you informed when I release new videos. We're currently studying the sovereignty of God, and we could make a lot of videos on this subject, but we're in the broader subject of salvation, so I'm keeping this brief. The question we left with last week was, what about cases where God hardened people's hearts or opened their hearts? Are these cases proving that God overrides any possible free will of the human heart? As I put it last week, does the sovereignty of God demand that we are nothing more than puppets? Let's begin with the case of Pharaoh in Exodus. We read in Exodus 10 and verse 20, "But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the sons of Israel go." The same is stated in verse 27, 11:10, and 14 verse 8, as well as earlier in chapter 9 and verse 12. It sounds like Pharaoh wasn't given any choice, even if he had wanted to do the will of God. Well, it's important to understand that these passages have actually been cherry-picked for the purpose of propping up this doctrine. Scripture also reveals that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. In Exodus chapter 8 and verse 15, chapter 8 and verse 32, and chapter 9 and verse 34, with a few texts that generally state that his heart was hardened, like chapter 7 and verse 13 and 22, chapter 8 verse 19, and chapter 9 and verse 7. The two situations described must both be true. God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but Pharaoh also hardened his own heart. Scripture would not contradict itself on this point. So God did harden Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh hardened his own heart. Pharaoh hardened his own heart by his own unwillingness to yield to God. God hardened Pharaoh's heart by not allowing his command to be changed. I want you to notice that Pharaoh wanted to amend God's command in Exodus chapter 8, verses 25 through 27. There we read, "And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, 'Go, sacrifice to your God within the land.' But Moses said, 'It is not right to do so, for we shall sacrifice to the Lord our God what is an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice what is an abomination to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not then stone us? We must go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he commands us.'" Now, if God had changed his command to comply with Pharaoh's offer to allow a sacrifice within the land, he would have avoided a hardening of Pharaoh's heart. You see, it isn't that God was supernaturally preventing Pharaoh. It was that God would not let Pharaoh have his own way. This is illustrated by an observation of Jesus in Matthew chapter 19, verses 7 through 8. Here the Pharisees asked Jesus, "Why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away?" He said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it has not been this way." So what we see is that God did not want the concession of Deuteronomy 24, where there was allowing of the certificate of divorce, but he permitted it because of the Israelites' hardness of heart. In other words, he knew they would not abide by God's design from the beginning, stated in verse 6. So he put a boundary around the situation for the time being. So since they wouldn't do it God's way, because their hearts were hardened, God gave them something they would keep. If he had not done so, he would have been hardening their hearts. What was determining the outcome regarding Pharaoh's heart? Listen to Exodus chapter 9, verses 18 through 21. "Behold, about this time tomorrow I will send a very heavy hail, such as has not been seen in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. And therefore sin, bring your livestock and whatever you have in the field to safety. Every man and beast that is found in the field and is not brought home, when the hail comes down on them, they will die. The one among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord made his servants and his livestock flee into the houses. But he who paid no regard to the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. It all came down to whether or not the word of the Lord was honored and heeded. And that is a choice made in the human heart. That God knew how it would all turn out doesn't change the fact that those people could choose for themselves. Well, that's it for our time. Next week, I want to talk about the Lord opening Lydia's heart. Is this a clear case of God acting supernaturally and directly upon a human heart to override individual choice? I hope you'll tune in for that study.